Gate agent viciously destroys black woman's passport. The badge she pulls out next makes him sweat. Why did the gate agent believe he could destroy her passport without facing serious consequences? What authority did the badge in her possession represent? Hello, everyone, and welcome to Afterglow Reckoning Tales, where arrogance, hidden identities, and immediate accountability can change everything. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another unforgettable story. Thank you for every view, comment, share, and moment you spend watching with us. Your continued support helps this storytelling community grow and brings our stories to viewers everywhere. Tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching from and what time it is there right now. We sincerely appreciate everyone joining us from around the globe. Now, settle in, watch every reaction closely, and let us enter the opening scene of today's gripping story. You don't belong on this flight, and I'm about to prove it. Ryan Mitchell's voice wasn't loud because he needed attention. It was loud because he wanted everyone to hear. The words cut through Gate B-17 at Chicago International Airport like a blade through glass. Passengers stopped typing. Coffee cups froze halfway to lips. A family waiting near the boarding line turned their heads toward the scene unfolding beside the security desk. And standing in the center of it all was Danielle Brooks. A black woman in a simple black coat, dark jeans, and white sneakers. No designer luggage. No assistant following behind her. No group of people clearing a path. Just a small carry-on bag, a passport, and a calm expression that made the chaos around her feel even louder. Ryan Mitchell, a gate agent with 12 years at the airline, stared at her passport like it was something offensive. "You expect me to believe this belongs to you?" he asked. Danielle looked at him quietly. "I expect you to do your job." That answer irritated him more than an argument would have. Because she wasn't afraid. Ryan had seen hundreds of passengers panic when questioned. He knew the pattern. A raised voice. A nervous explanation. A desperate attempt to prove innocence. But Danielle didn't give him any of that. She simply stood there. And somehow, that made him feel like he was losing control. "People try this all the time," Ryan said, holding the passport between two fingers. "Fake documents. Fake identities. Thinking they can just walk through because nobody wants to challenge them." The people nearby shifted uncomfortably. A few looked away. Others watched. Danielle noticed every single one. She had learned a long time ago that silence could reveal more than words. Ryan opened the passport again, flipping through the pages with exaggerated suspicion. "You're saying this is yours?" "Yes." "And you're saying you're supposed to be on this flight?" "Yes." He smiled slightly. Not because he found proof. Because he had already decided. "That's the problem," Ryan said. "People like you always think rules don't apply." The sentence landed heavier than he expected. For a moment, even Ryan seemed to realize what he had said. But instead of apologizing, he doubled down. "You know what? I'm done wasting time." He grabbed the passport. Danielle's eyes followed his hand. "Careful," she said softly. Ryan ignored her. "You're not going anywhere until we figure out what's happening." Then, in front of dozens of witnesses, he bent the passport. Once. Twice. And with a sudden violent motion, he tore it. The sound was small. Almost nothing. But inside that airport terminal, it felt enormous. A passport falling apart. A person's identity being treated like a piece of paper. A few passengers gasped. Someone whispered, "Did he really just do that?" Danielle didn't move. She stared at the torn pages in Ryan's hand. Not with anger. Not with shock. With disappointment. Because this wasn't about a passport anymore. It was about a decision Ryan had made the moment he saw her. Before he checked her information. Before he verified her documents. Before he asked a single proper question. He had already decided who she was. Ryan placed the damaged passport on the counter. "There," he said. "Now we have a real problem." Danielle slowly looked around the gate area. The cameras above them. The passengers. Watching. The young employee standing behind Ryan, visibly uncomfortable. Everything was being recorded. Everything was being remembered. And Ryan still didn't understand. He thought he had just embarrassed a passenger. He thought he had protected a gate. He thought he had the power. But what he didn't know was that Danielle Brooks wasn't just another traveler trying to catch a flight. She was someone who had spent years studying exactly what happened when people in small positions of authority abused the little power they had. And today, she wasn't there by accident. She was there to see the truth. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Danielle Brooks. Because in the next few minutes, Ryan Mitchell was about to discover something that would change everything. The woman he tried to remove from the gate was the one person in the room who had the power to decide what happened next. The passport was torn. The crowd was watching. But Danielle Brooks still hadn't raised her voice. And somehow, that was the thing that made Ryan Mitchell the most uncomfortable. Because anger was predictable. Fear was predictable. But calm? Calm was something he couldn't control. The gate area slowly returned to movement around them. Passengers whispered under their breath. Phones stayed lifted. Eyes moved between the damaged passport on the counter and the woman standing silently across from the gate agent who had just destroyed it. Ryan looked around, searching for support. He expected people to see him as the authority. After all, he had the uniform. He had the badge. He had the position. But what he didn't realize was that power and authority were not always the same thing. Danielle gently placed her hand on the counter. "My passport was valid when you took it." Ryan crossed his arms. "And now we have a problem because you refuse to cooperate." The statement hung in the air. A problem. That was how he described it. Not the fact that he had damaged a government document. Not the fact that he had embarrassed a passenger in front of an entire terminal. Not the fact that he had decided her identity was questionable before checking a single system. Just a problem. Danielle studied his face. She had seen that expression before. Not the exact same person. Not the exact same place. But the same certainty. The same belief that a person standing behind a counter somehow stood above everyone else. Years earlier, when Danielle was 26, she had walked into a corporate office wearing a simple suit and carrying a folder filled with financial reports. The receptionist looked at her, then looked behind her. "Are you here for an interview?" Danielle had smiled. "No. I'm leading the meeting." The woman laughed. Not loudly. Not cruelly. Just enough to remind Danielle that some people had already decided what success was supposed to look like. That day stayed with her. Not because it broke her. Because it taught her something. People often reveal who they are when they think nobody important is watching. And today, Ryan Mitchell thought nobody important was watching. He was wrong. "Ma'am," Ryan said, pulling her back into the moment, "you're making this harder than it needs to be." Danielle looked at him. "No. I think you made that decision when you tore my passport." A few passengers nodded quietly. Ryan noticed. His expression tightened. "This is exactly the attitude we deal with. People come here expecting special treatment." The words were careful. But the meaning behind them wasn't. A young woman standing nearby looked uncomfortable. Her name tag read Emily Carter. She was a new gate agent, barely 6 months into the job. She had watched everything. She had seen Danielle hand over the passport. She had seen Ryan skip the proper verification process. She had seen the moment his frustration turned into something else. Something personal. Emily finally stepped forward. "Ryan," he turned immediately. "What?" She hesitated. The passport scan was successful. The entire gate area became quiet. Ryan stared at her. "What did you say?" Emily swallowed. "I checked the system before you took it. Her boarding information matched. Everything was approved." Ryan's face changed slightly. "Not much. Just enough." Because for the first time, someone had challenged the story he was creating. "You're new here," Ryan said coldly. Emily lowered her voice. "But the system doesn't lie." That sentence landed harder than she expected. Passengers began looking at each other. A man near the window pulled out his phone. A woman holding a coffee whispered, "So he didn't even check." Ryan immediately turned back toward Danielle. "This is not your concern." Danielle almost smiled. Because that was the moment she understood. Ryan wasn't protecting security. He was protecting himself. He wasn't trying to find the truth. He was trying to control the situation before the truth appeared. Danielle reached into her bag and carefully removed her phone. Ryan noticed. "You're recording me?" "No," she said calmly. "Then what are you doing?" Danielle looked directly into his eyes. "Documenting." The word made him pause. Because documentation meant records. Records meant accountability. And accountability was something people feared when they had spent years believing nobody would question them. Ryan stepped closer. "You need to leave this area." Danielle didn't move. "I'm a ticketed passenger. You don't have a valid passport anymore." A silence followed. Danielle looked down at the torn document. Then back at him. And for the first time, there was something different in her eyes. Not anger. Not fear. A decision. "Ryan Mitchell," she said slowly. His expression changed. "How do you know my name?" Danielle looked at the badge hanging from his uniform. "Because you made sure everyone knew who you were." The crowd watched. Nobody spoke. Because everyone could feel it. The balance had started to shift. Ryan still had the uniform. He still had the badge. But Danielle had something much more powerful. She had the truth. And in just a few minutes, Ryan was going to learn the difference between having authority and being accountable for it. The moment Emily Carter spoke up, Ryan Mitchell realized something he hadn't expected. The room was no longer his. For years, Ryan had relied on the same thing every time a situation became difficult. Confidence. Not the confidence that came from knowing the rules. The confidence that came from believing nobody would challenge him. But now, standing at gate B17 with dozens of eyes watching, that confidence began to crack. Ryan looked at Emily, the newest employee on the team, as if her words had personally offended him. "You need to be careful about what you're saying." Emily stood still. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her voice didn't disappear. "I'm saying what happened." That sentence changed the atmosphere. Because truth has a different weight when someone finally decides to say it out loud. Danielle watched quietly. She didn't interrupt. She didn't need to. She understood something Ryan didn't. The strongest moments weren't always created by the person being targeted. Sometimes they came from the person who finally refused to look away. Ryan grabbed the damaged passport from the counter and held it up. "Everyone needs to calm down." This passenger was unable to provide proper documentation. A few passengers exchanged confused looks. Because they had seen the opposite. They had watched Danielle provide the passport. They had watched Ryan take it. They had watched him destroy it. A man standing near the boarding line stepped forward. Actually, that's not what happened. Ryan turned. The man held his phone in his hand. His name was Marcus Reed. A businessman traveling to Los Angeles. He had been silent from the beginning. But now he had seen enough. I recorded the whole thing, Marcus said. The gate went quiet. Ryan's face tightened. You recorded a private employee interaction? Marcus looked at him. No. I recorded a public employee interaction in front of 50 people. The words landed. Simple. Clear. Impossible to ignore. Danielle looked at Marcus for a moment. A small nod. A silent thank you. But Ryan wasn't ready to lose control. He stepped behind the counter, reaching for the phone. Delete that. Marcus moved back. Excuse me? You heard me. Ryan's voice became sharper. You don't know what you're interfering with. And there it was. The shift. The moment when a person stops defending their actions and starts defending their power. Danielle noticed it. Immediately. She had studied this pattern for years. A person with authority makes a mistake. Someone questions it. Instead of correcting the mistake, they attack the person who noticed. Ryan turned toward the radio attached to his desk. Security to gate B17. Emily's eyes widened. Ryan, are you serious? He ignored her. This passenger is causing a disturbance. Danielle almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was predictable. She looked around the gate. The cameras. The witnesses. The employees. Every piece of the situation was becoming evidence. And Ryan was creating more of it with every decision. Within moments, a security officer arrived. His name was Daniel Foster. He walked toward the gate expecting a normal situation. But then he saw the crowd. The phones. The torn passport. And the silence. What happened here? Daniel asked. Ryan immediately answered. This woman became aggressive and refused to cooperate. Danielle looked at him. For the first time, her expression changed. Not anger. Disbelief. You destroyed my passport, she said calmly. Ryan shook his head. She's twisting the story. Daniel looked between them. Then at Emily. Then at Marcus. 3 different witnesses. 3 different people who had no reason to lie. And all 3 were saying the same thing. Ryan noticed the hesitation. He stepped closer to Daniel. She's trying to create a scene. Danielle heard those words. Create a scene. Another phrase she knew well. Because whenever someone wanted to avoid accountability, they often accused the person they heard of causing the problem. She remembered another airport years ago. She was younger. Less experienced. Standing at a security checkpoint while a staff member searched through her belongings longer than everyone else. No explanation. No apology. Just suspicion. When she asked why, the answer was simple. Random check. But Danielle remembered looking around. Remembering who else was being checked. And who wasn't. That day, she learned something important. Bias rarely announces itself. Sometimes it hides behind policies. Sometimes it wears a uniform. Sometimes it carries a badge. Back at gate B17, Ryan adjusted his own badge. Proudly. He thought it represented control. He thought it gave him the final word. Danielle looked at that badge. Then she looked back at him. Ryan, she said quietly. Yes? You keep showing everyone your badge. A pause. But you still don't understand what it means. For the first time that morning, Ryan had no immediate response. Because something about her voice was different. Not threatening. Not emotional. Certain. The kind of certainty that comes from someone who already knows how this ends. And Ryan was about to discover that the badge hanging from his chest was nothing compared to the one Danielle had been carrying all along. Security is here because you called them. But the cameras are here because you were afraid of the truth. Danielle Brooks' words were quiet. Almost too quiet. And that was exactly why everyone heard them. Gate B17 had transformed from a normal boarding area into a courtroom without walls. There was no judge. No jury. Only witnesses. Passengers stood frozen with their phones in their hands. Some recorded openly. Others simply watched, trying to understand how a simple passport check had turned into something much bigger. Ryan Mitchell looked around the gate and felt something he wasn't used to feeling. Uncertainty. For years, Ryan had been comfortable behind that counter. He knew the routine. A passenger questioned his decision. He raised his voice. They backed down. A complaint was made. Then forgotten. But this time was different. Because Danielle Brooks wasn't backing down. And neither were the people watching. Security Officer Daniel Foster looked at the torn passport again. Ryan, did you damage this document? Ryan immediately shook his head. I was handling a difficult passenger situation. Daniel looked at him. That wasn't my question. A pause. The kind of pause that makes people reveal more than they intended. Ryan glanced at Danielle. Then at Emily. Then at Marcus holding his phone. Everyone was waiting. Finally, he said, it slipped. A few people in the crowd exchanged looks. Because everyone had heard the sound. Everyone had seen his hands. Everyone knew it didn't simply slip. Danielle remained silent. She didn't need to defend herself. The truth was already standing around her. Ryan noticed that. And it bothered him. He had expected Danielle to become emotional. He expected tears. Anger. A scene he could use as evidence against her. But she gave him nothing. Instead, she stood with the same calm expression she had from the beginning. The calm of someone who understood that facts did not need to scream. Ma'am, Danielle said carefully, can you explain what happened from your perspective? Danielle nodded. I presented my passport for verification. Her voice was steady. He questioned its validity before checking the system. She looked toward Emily. She verified my information was correct. Then toward Marcus. He recorded the interaction. Finally, she looked at the damaged passport. And after that, he destroyed my document. No exaggeration. No dramatic performance. Just facts. Ryan laughed quietly. You're making it sound worse than it was. Danielle turned her eyes toward him. No, a pause. I'm describing exactly what happened. That sentence made the entire gate silent. Because there was a difference between defending yourself and telling the truth. Ryan stepped closer. You have no idea what kind of pressure we deal with here. Danielle looked at him. You're right. For a moment, Ryan seemed surprised. Then she continued. I don't know what pressure you face every day. She looked around at the passengers. But I know what happens when someone uses pressure as an excuse to disrespect another person. The words reached beyond Ryan. They reached everyone watching. Because this wasn't only about one employee. It was about every moment when someone was judged before being understood. Every time a person was treated differently because of how they looked. Every time someone had to prove they belonged. Ryan crossed his arms. You're turning this into something it's not. Danielle studied him. No, her voice lowered. You did that when you decided who I was before you knew my name. That sentence hit harder than anything else. Because Ryan knew. Deep down, he knew. The passport was never the real issue. The flight was never the real issue. The issue was the assumption he made the second Danielle walked up to the counter. A black woman wearing simple clothes. A person he thought would not have power. A person he thought would not challenge him. A person he thought would leave quietly. But Danielle had spent her entire career understanding something important. People often reveal their deepest beliefs when they think there are no consequences. Ryan looked at her. Then at the crowd. The balance had completely shifted. The same badge that gave him confidence moments ago now felt heavier on his chest. Because a badge could give someone authority. But it could not protect them from accountability. Daniel Foster stepped forward. Ryan, I need you to step away from the counter. The words were simple. But they carried a message. For the first time that morning, Ryan was not controlling the situation. He was being managed. His face changed. This is ridiculous. Nobody answered. Because everyone knew something was coming. Something Danielle had not revealed yet. Something hidden beneath the calm. Ryan still believed this was only about a damaged passport. He still believed Danielle was just a passenger fighting for a seat on a plane. He still had no idea that the person standing in front of him had walked into Gate B17 with a purpose. And the badge she was about to reveal would change everything. The room became silent when Daniel Foster told Ryan Mitchell to step away from the counter. Not because the order was loud. Because everyone understood what it meant. For the first time that morning, Ryan was no longer the person controlling the situation. The man who had spent the last 20 minutes questioning someone else's identity was now the one being questioned. Ryan looked around the gate. The passengers. The cameras. His co-workers. Everyone who had watched him slowly lose control. This is unbelievable, Ryan said. His voice was lower now. Less confident. This woman is making a complaint because I did my job. Danielle watched him carefully. There it was again. The same pattern. The same attempt to change the story. Not what happened. But how people should feel about what happened. She had seen it in boardrooms. She had seen it in negotiations. She had seen it in moments when people were forced to face their own decisions. When the facts became uncomfortable, some people didn't accept responsibility. They searched for someone else to blame. Daniel looked at Ryan. Step away from the counter, please. Ryan hesitated. Then he looked toward Danielle. You planned this. The accusation surprised everyone. Danielle slightly tilted her head. Planned what? This whole thing. Ryan pointed toward the phone. The recording. The witnesses. The complaints. A quiet reaction moved through the crowd. People couldn't believe what they were hearing. Danielle took a slow breath. No, Ryan. She looked directly at him. The only thing I planned was arriving at the airport. A pause. Everything after that was your choice. Those words stayed in the air. Because they were true. Danielle didn't create the situation. She didn't tell him to tear the passport. She didn't tell him to ignore the verification system. She didn't tell him to treat her differently. She simply arrived. And Ryan showed everyone who he was. Emily Carter stood behind the counter, watching the exchange. She had worked with Ryan for months. She knew he could be impatient. She knew he could be difficult. But she had never seen him like this. Not until Danielle walked through the gate. Not until he decided she was someone he could intimidate. Emily looked at Danielle. There was something different about her. Not just confidence. Experience. Like she had been in situations like this before. Like she knew exactly how to respond without losing herself. "Ryan," Emily said quietly. He turned. "What now?" She looked uncomfortable. But she continued. "You should probably stop." The word seemed to surprise him more than anything else. Because Emily was no longer afraid. Ryan stared at her. "You're choosing her side?" Emily shook her head. "No," she looked at the torn passport. "I'm choosing what I saw." For a moment, nobody spoke. Because that was the moment everything changed. It was no longer Danielle's word against Ryan's. It was the truth against the version of events Ryan was trying to create. Daniel Foster stepped closer. "Ryan. I need your employee badge." Ryan immediately reacted. "No," the answer came too quickly. Too emotionally. The crowd noticed. A man near the boarding line whispered, "Why is he refusing?" Ryan realized his mistake. He tried to recover. "I mean, I don't understand why this is necessary." Danielle looked at him. "You spent 20 minutes asking everyone else to prove who they are." A pause. "Now someone is asking you." The sentence cut through him. Because that was the irony. Ryan had demanded proof from Danielle. But when accountability arrived at his own door, suddenly proof felt unfair. Daniel extended his hand. "Your badge, Ryan." Slowly, Ryan reached toward it. But before he removed it, he looked at Danielle one more time. "You think this makes you powerful?" Danielle remained calm. "No," she stepped slightly closer. "I think this shows how much power you thought you had." Ryan froze. Because those words revealed something he didn't want anyone to see. The badge had never been the source of his confidence. The position was. The ability to decide who waited. Who explained. Who was believed. Who was ignored. Danielle looked at the badge on his chest. A small piece of plastic. A symbol. A tool. But not a measure of character. "People confuse authority with respect," she said. "Authority can be given." A pause. Respect has to be earned. Ryan finally removed the badge. The moment was small. But everyone felt it. Because the balance of power had completely changed. Then Danielle reached into her bag. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Just calmly. She pulled out a small black folder. Ryan watched. His expression changed. Because suddenly, he realized something. This wasn't just a passenger complaint. This wasn't just a damaged passport. This was something much bigger. Danielle opened the folder. Inside was something Ryan never expected to see. A badge. Not an employee badge. Not a gate agent badge. Something completely different. And as she held it in her hand, the entire gate waited. Because Ryan Mitchell had spent the morning believing he knew exactly who Danielle Brooks was. But now, he was about to discover he had been wrong from the very beginning. The badge was only inches away from Danielle Brooks' hand. But somehow, the entire gate area felt like time had stopped. Ryan Mitchell stared at the small black folder she had taken from her bag. A few seconds earlier, he was certain he understood the situation. He believed Danielle was just another passenger. Someone who would eventually get tired. Someone who would leave. Someone who would accept being treated unfairly because challenging authority was too difficult. But now, for the first time, a small doubt entered his mind. Who was she? Danielle opened the folder slowly. No dramatic movement. No attempt to impress anyone. Just the quiet confidence of someone who had never needed to prove her importance. Inside was a professional identification badge. Not a boarding pass. Not a passenger document. Not something a regular traveler carried. Ryan leaned forward slightly. Then he saw the name. Danielle Brooks. His expression changed. Not because he recognized the name immediately, but because of what was written beneath it. Chief Compliance Officer, National Air Operations Board. The air around Gate B-17 changed instantly. The passengers who had been whispering went silent. Emily Carter's eyes widened. Marcus lowered his phone slightly. Even Daniel Foster looked surprised. Ryan stared at the badge. Then at Danielle. Then back at the badge. No, the word escaped before he could stop it. Danielle looked at him calmly. Yes. For the first time all morning, Ryan had nothing prepared to say. Because the person he thought he could intimidate was not someone powerless. She was the person responsible for evaluating the very systems he worked under. The person who reviewed complaints. The person who examined employee conduct. The person who studied exactly what happened when authority was misused. Ryan took a step back. This doesn't change anything. But his voice betrayed him. Everyone heard the uncertainty. Danielle held the badge in her hand. No, Ryan. A pause. It changes everything. She looked around the gate. At the passengers. At the cameras. At the employees. This morning, you believed I was someone you could dismiss. Her eyes returned to him. You believed my appearance told you everything you needed to know. Nobody spoke. Because everyone understood what she meant. The passport was never just a passport. The boarding pass was never just a boarding pass. The moment Danielle approached the counter, Ryan had already created a story about her. And everything he did afterward came from that assumption. Ryan shook his head. You're saying this was some kind of investigation? Danielle didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was more complicated. She had not planned for Ryan. She had not chosen him. She had simply been traveling through an airport where thousands of people passed every day. But she had spent years creating systems designed to find moments exactly like this. Moments when someone believed nobody important was watching. I was reviewing passenger experience standards, Danielle finally said. Her voice remained calm. I was observing how employees handled difficult situations. She looked at the torn passport. And you showed me something no report could explain better. Ryan's face became tense. You're going to ruin my career over one mistake? Danielle looked at him. One mistake? The question was quiet. But powerful. Ryan, mistakes happen when people accidentally do something wrong. She held up the damaged passport. This was a decision. The crowd remained silent. Because that distinction mattered. Everyone makes mistakes. But choices reveal character. Ryan looked frustrated. You don't know anything about me. Danielle nodded. You're right. A pause. I don't know your entire story. Then she stepped closer. But I know what you chose to do when you thought I had no power. That sentence hit differently. Because it was the truth behind every moment of discrimination. The moment when someone believes they are safe. The moment when they believe there will be no consequences. The moment when they reveal who they really are. Emily looked at Danielle with admiration. Not because she had a powerful title. But because she had remained composed through everything. She had been insulted. Humiliated. Disrespected. Yet she never became what Ryan expected her to become. She never lost control. She never gave him the reaction he wanted. Ryan looked toward Daniel Foster. This is unfair. Daniel looked at him. Unfair? Ryan stopped. Because suddenly the word sounded different coming from him. Danielle noticed. And she understood the lesson. For some people, fairness only becomes important when they are the ones being questioned. She closed the folder. I didn't reveal this badge because I wanted special treatment. Her voice softened. I revealed it because without it, you never would have listened. The statement affected everyone standing there. Because that was the painful truth. A person should not need a title to receive basic respect. A person should not need authority to be believed. A person should not need power to be treated with dignity. Danielle placed the badge back in her hand. And Ryan Mitchell finally understood. The badge was never the source of her strength. It was only proof of what had been there all along. The intelligence. The discipline. The courage. The woman he underestimated. And now, with the truth standing in front of him, Ryan realized something terrifying. He had spent the entire morning trying to remove Danielle Brooks from Gate B17. But the person he was really removing was himself. The badge was in Danielle Brooks' hand. And suddenly, the same badge that Ryan Mitchell had proudly worn all morning seemed meaningless. Because there was a difference between wearing authority and understanding responsibility. The gate area remained completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody wanted to miss what happened next. Ryan stared at Danielle's identification. His eyes moved across the words again and again, hoping somehow he had misunderstood. But the truth remained. Danielle Brooks. Chief Compliance Officer. National Air Operations Board. The person he had accused. The person he had humiliated. The person he tried to remove from the airport, was the person responsible for examining whether people like him followed the rules. Ryan slowly shook his head. This isn't possible. Danielle looked at him. Why? The question was simple. But Ryan struggled to answer. Because the reason was not professional. It was personal. He had already created an image of her in his mind. A passenger who looked like she didn't belong. Someone without influence. Someone without power. And now reality was standing directly in front of him. You never told me who you were, Ryan said. Danielle nodded. That's true. She placed the badge back into view. Because I shouldn't have needed to. Those words affected everyone around her. Because they exposed the real issue. Respect should not depend on a person's title. Kindness should not depend on a person's income. Fair treatment should not depend on whether someone can punish you afterward. But Ryan had done exactly that. He had only changed his behavior after discovering Danielle had power. And that was the moment everyone understood the difference between regret and accountability. Ryan looked uncomfortable. So what? You're going to fire me? Danielle looked at him for a long moment. No, the answer surprised him. And everyone listening. No? Danielle shook her head. This was never about revenge. She looked around the gate. At some point, people started believing justice means destroying someone who made a mistake. A pause. But real justice means making sure the same mistake does not happen to someone else. The words carried through the terminal. Marcus lowered his phone slightly. Emily watched Danielle carefully. Because this was the part that surprised her most. Danielle had every reason to embarrass Ryan. She had every reason to make him feel the same humiliation he had caused her. But she didn't. She chose something different. Accountability. Ryan looked confused. You're saying you don't want me punished? Danielle's expression remained calm. I'm saying the consequences should match the actions. She looked toward the damaged passport. You didn't make a mistake checking my documents. Her voice became firmer. You made a choice to ignore the process. She looked at Emily. You made a choice to dismiss another employee who told you the truth. Then she looked back at Ryan. And you made a choice to believe a stranger's appearance mattered more than her explanation. The gate became completely still. Because Danielle wasn't attacking him. She was holding up a mirror. And sometimes, the hardest thing for a person to face, is seeing themselves clearly. Ryan looked down. For the first time, he noticed how many people had witnessed everything. The passengers. The employees. The security officer. The cameras. There was nowhere left to hide behind his position. A few minutes earlier, he believed the badge on his uniform protected him. Now he understood. That badge had never protected him. It had only revealed the responsibility he carried. Daniel Foster stepped forward. "Ms. Brooks, we need to document the incident formally." Danielle nodded. "Agreed." Ryan looked up. Ms. Brooks, it was the first time he had said her name with respect. Not suspicion. Not dismissal. Respect. Danielle noticed the change. But she didn't celebrate it. Because respect that arrives only after power is revealed is not the same as respect given freely. "Ryan," she said. He looked at her. "Do you know what the most dangerous thing about authority is?" He remained silent. "People forget it was given to serve others." A pause. Not to make others feel smaller. The words stayed with him. Because deep down, Ryan knew. The problem was never that Danielle had a badge. The problem was that he needed to see one before he treated her like a person. As employees began documenting the incident, Danielle stepped away from the counter. The crowd slowly began moving again. The flight announcement echoed through the terminal. Life continued. But something had changed. Not just for Ryan. For everyone who witnessed it. They saw a woman who was underestimated walk into a moment designed to break her, and turn it into a lesson. And Ryan Mitchell finally understood the truth he had missed from the beginning. The most powerful person in the room was never the one with the loudest voice. It was the one who remained standing when everyone expected her to fall. The airport had returned to its normal rhythm. Announcements echoed through the terminal. Passengers walked toward their gates. Suitcases rolled across the polished floor. But at gate B-17, something much bigger than a delayed flight was unfolding. A report was being written. And this time, Ryan Mitchell was not the person holding the pen. He sat behind the counter quietly as Daniel Foster documented every detail of the incident. The same counter where Ryan had stood with confidence only minutes earlier now felt completely different. Because the power had shifted. Not because Danielle Brooks demanded it. Because the truth exposed it. Sarah Whitmore, the airport operations manager, arrived at the gate after receiving the internal alert. She was known as someone who rarely reacted emotionally. She believed facts mattered more than assumptions. But when she arrived and saw the torn passport placed on the counter, her expression changed. What happened here? Daniel Foster looked at Ryan. Then at Danielle. Then handed Sarah the preliminary report. Sarah read silently. The longer she read, the more serious her expression became. "Ryan," she finally said. He looked up. "Yes? Did you destroy a passenger's passport?" Ryan opened his mouth. But the confident answer he had given earlier was gone. "I was trying to resolve a security concern." Sarah didn't move. "That wasn't my question." The same question. The same silence. The same moment where excuses became impossible. Danielle watched quietly. She had seen this moment many times before. Not just in airports. In companies. In organizations. In rooms where people believed their position protected them. The hardest part of accountability was not admitting what happened. It was accepting that the explanation you created for yourself was not the same as the reality everyone else witnessed. Sarah turned toward Emily. Did the passenger provide valid documentation? Emily nodded. Yes. Was the verification system working? Yes. Was there any indication the passport was fraudulent? Emily looked down. No, Sarah closed the report. Then she looked back at Ryan. So why was the passenger treated this way? Ryan remained silent. And that silence answered more than words could. Because sometimes the absence of an explanation becomes the explanation. Danielle stepped forward. Sarah, I want to be clear. Everyone looked toward her. This is not about one employee having a bad day. Her voice was calm. This is about what happens when someone believes they can make decisions based on assumptions instead of facts. Sarah nodded slowly. Because she understood. Organizations did not fail only because of major mistakes. Sometimes they failed because small acts of disrespect were ignored until they became normal. Ryan looked at Danielle. You really want everyone to believe I'm some kind of bad person? Danielle looked at him. No, the answer surprised him. I want everyone to understand that good people can still make harmful choices. A pause. And harmful choices still need consequences. That sentence stayed with him. Because it removed the easy escape. Ryan wanted the conversation to be about whether he was a good person. Danielle brought it back to what he had done. Actions. Choices. Responsibility. Sarah looked at Daniel. Secure the footage from the cameras. Daniel nodded. Already requested. Preserve the passenger recording as well. Marcus stepped forward. I'll provide my video. Sarah thanked him. And in that moment, something important happened. The witnesses who had been silent earlier were no longer just observers. They became part of the solution. Danielle looked around the gate. She saw passengers who had watched everything. Some looked uncomfortable. Some looked ashamed that they had stayed quiet. But she didn't judge them. Because she knew change rarely begins with everyone being brave at the same time. Sometimes it begins with one person deciding they will no longer ignore what is wrong. Sarah turned back to Danielle. Ms. Brooks, I apologize for what happened today. Danielle nodded. I appreciate that. Sarah hesitated. But I know an apology is not enough. Danielle looked at her. No, a pause. It's a beginning. Those words carried a different kind of power. Because Danielle wasn't there to destroy. She was there to reveal. To show what happens when people are judged before they are known. When someone's appearance becomes a reason for suspicion. When respect is given only after someone proves they have influence. Ryan looked down at the empty space where his employee badge had been. The symbol he once believed made him important was gone. And now he finally understood. The badge never created his authority. His actions defined it. Sarah handed the completed report to Danielle. We'll begin a full review. Danielle accepted it. Good. Then she looked toward Ryan one last time. Not with anger. Not with satisfaction. With disappointment. Because the saddest part was knowing this moment could have been avoided. A simple question. A simple verification. A simple choice to treat another person with dignity. But Ryan chose something else. And now everyone in Gate B17 knew the truth. The woman he tried to silence was the person who made sure his voice would be heard, along with the consequences of what he had done. The next morning, Gate B17 looked exactly the same. The same airport. The same boarding screens. The same endless movement of travelers rushing toward their destinations. But something had changed. Because some moments disappear after they happen. And some moments become lessons that people carry with them. For Ryan Mitchell, the events of the previous day did not disappear. He sat in a quiet office away from the terminal, looking at the report in front of him. Not a complaint. Not an accusation. A record. Every action. Every decision. Every moment when he had the opportunity to choose differently. And every moment when he chose not to. The torn passport had been replaced. The passenger had continued her journey. The airport had continued operating. But the consequences remained. Because accountability was never about one dramatic moment. It was about understanding what that moment revealed. Across the airport, Danielle Brooks stood near a large window overlooking the runway. Planes lifted into the sky one after another. Thousands of people traveling. Thousands of stories happening at the same time. Sarah Whitmore approached her. "Your flight leaves in 30 minutes. Danielle smiled slightly. "Thank you." Sarah paused. "I want you to know something." Danielle turned. "What?" Sarah looked toward the terminal. "When I first heard about what happened, I thought it was another employee mistake." She took a breath. "But after reviewing everything, I realized it was bigger than that." Danielle listened. "It was about the moments people don't see." Sarah continued. "The assumptions made before anyone speaks. The decisions made before anyone checks the facts." Danielle nodded. "Those moments are usually where the real problems begin." For years, Danielle had built her career around understanding those moments. Not because she wanted to catch people failing. But because she believed systems only improved when people were willing to confront uncomfortable truths. She remembered being the person on the other side. The person who walked into a room and was underestimated before saying a word. The person whose achievements were questioned because they did not match someone else's expectations. But those experiences did not make her bitter. They made her determined. Because every time someone underestimated her, she learned something valuable. People who judge quickly often reveal more about themselves than the person they judge. Sarah looked at Danielle. "Why didn't you tell him who you were from the beginning?" Danielle looked back toward the runway. "Because I shouldn't have needed to." The answer was simple. Power should not be the price of respect. A title should not be required for dignity. A badge should not be necessary for someone to recognize another person's humanity. Sarah nodded. "That's something a lot of people need to hear." Danielle smiled. "Then make sure they hear it." Later that day, the airport released a statement. Not a statement focused on one employee. Not a statement designed to protect an image. A statement about change. New training. New accountability procedures. A stronger review process for passenger complaints. Because the goal was never just to punish one person. The goal was to prevent the next person from experiencing the same thing. Meanwhile, Ryan Mitchell sat alone after his final meeting. For the first time in years, he looked at his own behavior without excuses. He remembered Danielle standing in front of him. Calm. Patient. Composed. He remembered how quickly he had judged her. How certain he was that he understood her. And the realization was painful. He never actually saw Danielle Brooks. He only saw the version of her he had created. In his own mind. And that was the mistake. Not the passport. Not the argument. The assumption. Weeks later, Danielle received a message from Emily Carter. The young gate agent who had spoken up. She thanked Danielle. Not because she had exposed Ryan. But because she had shown Emily something important. Courage did not always look like confrontation. Sometimes courage looked like standing still. Speaking clearly. And refusing to become silent when something was wrong. Danielle read the message and smiled. Because that was the real victory. Not a badge. Not a title. Not proving she had power. The real victory was that someone else had learned to use theirs responsibly. As Danielle walked through the airport one final time, she passed gate B17. The place where someone tried to make her feel small. The place where someone believed her appearance told the whole story. But that was never the truth. A person's value was never hidden in their clothes, their skin color, their position, or the assumptions of strangers. It was always there. Before anyone recognized it. Before anyone respected it. Before anyone saw the badge. And that was the lesson Ryan Mitchell would remember. The strongest people are not always the ones who announce their power. Sometimes they are the ones who remain calm when others try to take it away. Because true dignity does not need permission. And true justice does not need to shout. It only needs someone brave enough to stand for what is right.